I've been trying to find a better way to build storage that can really handle water. So this time, I took a completely different approach. I used to build outdoor storage like indoor furniture and waterproof it afterward. It worked, but it was more trouble than it was worth. That's why I changed the design itself. I picked up some 30mm square aluminum tubing for the main frame. The walls are only about 2mm thick, but square tubing is incredibly strong, more than enough for this. For the feet, I bought adapters sized to fit the 30mm tubing so I could install adjustable feet. They just hammer in, although they were surprisingly tight. Once they're seated flush with no gaps, they're done. For the corners, I found these connectors from a sign-making supplier. Just slide one in and secure it with 1 or 2 self-drilling screws. That's all it takes, and the joint is rock solid. Pretty convenient. For the cross rails, I used these T-shaped brackets. I realized during the test fit that I needed to shorten the tube by the thickness of the bracket. So I trimmed it quickly, clamped everything in place, and secured it with self-drilling screws just like before. For the L angle, I skipped the connectors and screwed it directly to the frame. Same as before, I used self-drilling screws. Now I can start assembling the frame. Most of this build uses aluminum, but the power tools are basically the same as for woodworking. The only real change is the metal cutting blade, so aluminum is pretty approachable if you already build with wood. The downside is the price. That's one frame done. The other goes together the same way. The frame and outer panels are aluminum, but since the inside should stay dry, I'm using Lowen plywood inside. Making every drawer and slide mount from aluminum would make things unnecessarily difficult, so I made the mounting structure from wood. This cabinet will hold a trash bin, so I'm using a removable plastic pail. I wanted it to drop neatly into the box, so I used my router circle guide for the opening. With this type of circle guide, cutting all the way through releases the center point, so I leave a thin layer and finish the cut with a jigsaw. Let's see how it fits. Pretty much perfect. I sized it so the bottom just touches when the pail is fully seated. A thin rubber pad takes care of the last few millimeters. For the vinyl wrap, I use 3M's primer made for DI-NOC, but it's not ideal on wood. It's very thin, so plywood absorbs a lot of it. The Belgian primer I used before worked better on Lowen plywood. On aluminum or plastic though, this one is much easier to use. The edges absorb it especially fast, so I gave them a second coat. For the finish, I'm using scratch-resistant DI-NOC PS006AR. I apply the vinyl the same way as usual. Lay it on the bench, place the plywood on top, then flip it over and work it down. Putting the plywood down first and dropping the vinyl on top tends to cause wrinkles, so this way works much better. This time, I covered the edges separately instead of wrapping them over, but I wouldn't recommend it. After sanding the edges, a tiny bit of bare wood can still show, which leaves a path for water to get in. As usual, I sand the corners to blend everything together. This is the vinyl wrapped finish, and this is paint. The difference is pretty obvious. The edges are separate pieces, but sanding blends the seams together nicely. At a glance, it looks like one continuous sheet. I also managed to trap a brush hair under the vinyl, so check the surface before you stick it down. I drilled the screw holes after applying the vinyl. A little bare wood is exposed, but this is inside the dry area, so it's fine. With the paint dry, I can assemble the drawer box for the pail. Now I can join the two frame sections. Normally, I assemble four-legged frames upright to avoid any wobble, but this time, the adjustable feet take care of that. Since the cabinet will sit on concrete, I designed it to compensate for uneven ground. The plywood sits on the L angle and gets screwed in from underneath. From here, everything else can be attached just like a normal wooden cabinet. Mounting drawer slides directly to the aluminum frame would be a pain, but the wooden inner structure makes it easy. I made the side panel 1 millimeter smaller than the inside of the aluminum frame. Since aluminum doesn't flex much, there's no room to force it into place. Trimming it afterward would expose the plywood edge, so the only option was to reproduce the CAD dimensions accurately. This was the part I was most worried about, but it fit perfectly. With this open pipe frame structure, I can clamp the front panel in place and screw it on with the drawer still closed. It's so much easier, and I may use the same idea in future wooden cabinets. I use stainless steel hinges. Since I'm mounting them to aluminum, I carefully marked and drilled the pilot holes. The outer panels are aluminum composite board. It's strong enough, highly water resistant, easy to work with, and not too expensive. I use this stuff all the time. I wrapped only the one panel that stays visible. I skip primer here because the edges are wrapped and rarely touched, though primer would still be better. The side panels use countersunk tapping screws, so I had to drill each pilot hole first. The back is completely hidden, so I left the aluminum composite board unfinished. I added EPDM foam tape behind all the front panels, so water stays out. The only downside is that if you open them while they're wet, a few drops can still run down, but I can live with that. Only the two rear feet have casters, so I can lift the front and roll the cabinet. And that finishes one side. The other cabinet uses the same aluminum frame. This one will hold cleaning tools, including a deck brush and a Makita blower vacuum. I added a simple divider using L-angle and Lowen plywood. Then I found a problem. The frame was nowhere near square. I loosened the screws and used the top panel as a guide to square it up, then tightened everything again. For the blower vacuum, I'm using a spare hook I already had. I wanted to catch the handle right here. I cut a few scraps of aluminum tube and angle. then bonded them together with 2-part metal epoxy. This is a simple drying oven I built. Turn on the heat gun and the temperature starts to rise. At 56 degrees, it shuts off automatically. Once it cools back down to 54, it turns on again. That keeps the inside of the pail at around 55 degrees. But I didn't want to trust glue alone, so I added rivets. For riveting, I use this Lobtex attachment. It runs from a regular power tool, which makes the job easy. From the side, it fits like this. I kept the clearances as tight as I could. For the front, I'm using a push latch. The sealing foam pushes the panel outward, so a magnet isn't strong enough. A long stroke push latch with 5mm foam worked just right. The upper section is a Lowen plywood box wrapped in DI-NOC, and I sealed the inside corners to keep rain from getting through. I just used ordinary sealant from the hardware store. Apply it, smooth it out, then peel the masking tape while winding it around a disposable stick to keep the mess under control. That gives me a clean seal. Next, I added a base for the small roof. It slopes slightly toward the back. On top, I'm using leftover corrugated galvanized steel from another project. It's a little short, but the roof drains toward the back, so that's fine. I fixed it down with self-drilling screws and rubber washers. Trimmed corner pieces seal the 4 edges, and that finishes the roof. It's only a simple weatherproof roof, but most of the cabinet is already under cover. I added a strip of firm foam at the back so the shelf wouldn't rattle. And that's both cabinets assembled indoors. Now I just need to take them outside and install them. With the upper and lower sections joined, I covered only the areas that actually get rained on with leftover galvanized steel. These were scraps from the larger cabinet I'll show in the next video, so I put them to use here. It's definitely a patchwork job. Then I rolled it into place, and it was done.